Joining us now, Representative Tom Reed of New York. Representative, it is great to have you. After the Attorney General released his 4-page summary back in March, you released a statement saying in part, quote, after 2 years and more than $25 million in taxpayer money spent, the president has been exonerated. We must put people first and end this culture of division. But Barr's memo explicitly pointed out that President Trump had not been exonerated by the special counsel. So how did you reach your conclusion?
Well, I think it was very clear. What the report said is that there was no collusion and there was no obstruction, as determined by the appropriate officials that did this 2-year-plus investigation. And I'll tell you, the evidence led where we should all be celebrating as Americans that there was no collusion, there was no obstruction, and that a duly held person in the White House after an election, the people's voice is spoken, and we can move forward and put this behind us.
Representative, just to be clear, it didn't say that there was no obstruction of justice. It was just the case that Mueller's team couldn't make a decision on that. And so what more do you want to read in the report out later today?
Well, let's just be very clear. The decision on obstruction obviously wasn't Bob Mueller's. That was for the AG to make the determination, and that's the Attorney General. That's our chief law enforcement official, and they reached the conclusion that there was no obstruction there, and we should move forward. And so what I'm looking for is obviously as much information as possible to be shared with the American people so that they can make their own informed decision as to what they believe the report says. But I believe the report will show exactly what the conclusions have been reached so far, indicate that there's no collusion, there's no obstruction, and that this is a thing we should celebrate. We shouldn't continue the division of political warfare that's at foot, in my opinion, right now.
Representative Reed, you are, of course, a very close ally of President Trump. Have you had any communication with the White House or the Justice Department about the report and its contents and its release?
I have not. And so, you know, we're obviously receiving the information just like every other member of Congress and the public through the public releases that have occurred. And I will tell you, I was just glad to see that the investigation came to a conclusion. Millions of dollars have been spent. This was not an open and shut investigation over 24 hours. This spanned 2 years worth of time and millions of dollars expended, many investigations and evidentiary items recovered and discovered, and the conclusion should be celebrated. And at the end of the day, it is time to look at this investigation, look at this report, but also while we look at this, remember, in Congress, our #1 priority is to solve problems for the people we represent, and that's hopefully a message that will start to resonate across the country.
Representative, do you plan on reading the report when it's released later today?
Oh, of course, of course. I'll read the full report just like everyone else, and you know we'll look at that report just like we should as members of Congress. And the good news, though, is that the information that's already been released, the initial declaration by the Attorney General, should be something we should be celebrating. But what I see is a division of political warfare between Democrats and Republicans up on the Hill, and in particular on the Democratic side right now, that want to keep this narrative of impeachment, this narrative of collusion, obstruction in the domain for political purposes. And from my perspective, I think the American people are tiring of this.
Do you think there's anything in the report or will be anything in the report that should concern President Trump? There are still ongoing investigations in several states about President Trump.
Yeah, you know, obviously, and as always said on each and every one of these matters, you know, follow the evidence and let the evidence dictate the investigations and have them come to their conclusions as expeditiously as they possibly can. But there is a serious question that still is outstanding in my mind, and this is the quote-unquote insurance policy that the Justice Department and people in the, I should say not the Justice Department, in the FBI, this page-struck type of relationship where they're referring to this quote-unquote insurance policy. I want to know what that is.
Representative, what makes Bill Barr so credible in your eyes that you trust his conclusion that there was no obstruction of justice?
Well, I will tell you, this is a long-term public servant. You know, you saw him testify at his confirmation hearings, and you saw people on both sides of the aisle applaud his credentials, applaud his commitment to following the law, following the evidence. And so I think the Attorney General, now all of a sudden you see the political warfare where people are attacking his character, his credibility, and that's just not who the Attorney General is. I have full faith that the Attorney General will follow the law, will follow the evidence, and present it according to the way that it should be presented, like he has done for decades in his public service to our country.
Representative Tom Reed of New York, it is always great to have you on Cheddar. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
You guys do a great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks.